This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guests only. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. And because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Welcome to Once Shattered, Picking Up the Pieces, a podcast devoted to changing the way eating disorders and mental illness are viewed in our society. With your hosts, Jack and Linda Major and Ellen Bennett. Today's guest is Mehek Mohan. Mehek Mohan is a Stanford Graduate School of Business student and the co-founder of Kahani, a personalized recovery platform for individuals navigating eating disorders. Prior to Stanford, Mehek led AI and automation initiatives at Genentech within the early clinical development team. She earned her undergraduate degree in molecular and cell biology from UC Berkeley and has experience in early-stage venture capital. Mehek is passionate about making mental health care tools more accessible by leveraging cutting-edge advances in technology.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have a wonderful show for you, but first, I'd like to introduce my co-host, my husband, and my best friend, Jack Major, and my dear friend, our dear friend and fellow advocate, Ellen Bennett.
Well, once again, welcome, listeners. We're so glad you're with us again today. We're so glad to be here today and have this incredible podcast and this talk about this amazing new technology.
And this is episode 146, Using Technology to Support and Sustain Recovery with Mehek Mohan.
Welcome. We're so excited to be here. This is, I have to say it, the pilot has just launched, and we are so excited to talk about this platform and new technology. So, yay!
Welcome, Mehek. It's wonderful to meet you. This is such an exciting app, and it's going to change and enhance and help healing for so many people. We're so excited to be able to share this.
Yes, and just a reminder, this podcast is brought to you by our nonprofits, K&B for Answers and the Emily Connection.
Okay, I'm going to start with the quote for the day. And I chose this quote because this is what you're doing. The quote is, "Leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality." And that is Warren Bennis, who's an author. But I was like, this is exactly what we're talking about today, is this incredible leadership and taking vision and making it happen. And you're going to create change. And that is so exciting, and just, I can't wait to get going on this. Okay, here we go.
We've talked so often about thinking outside the box, and this is truly, just thinking outside the box. So, what's been happening, for the last 25 or 30 years in eating disorder therapy, and this is just, I'm so excited about this.
And creating options and meeting the person where they're at and providing additional supports because everybody's different and needs are different. And so here we go. Mehek, it was so inspiring to meet you and learn about Kahani. The use of technology to support treatment and improve outcomes and it's been a struggle because there have been many things introduced that didn't necessarily take hold. Kahani is different, and I have such hope for it. Expanding options for individuals who are in the process of recovery is so important. Recovery takes time. It is not linear. There are no easy fixes. The more tools that are available, the more individuals will engage in their own recovery. For anyone who struggles with an eating disorder or a mental health issue, it is so important to be validated and feel empowered to reclaim and heal.
Mehek, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. Oh, man, Linda, Ellen, Jack, it is such a pleasure to be here and an honor to be able to speak with you on a topic that is so close to my heart and to your hearts. And through an avenue that, my co-founder and I put so much of our time and energy into. And I really do have to say that I loved the quote that you shared. And the piece I'll add to it is, building these types of tools and new resources takes a village. And it's so important to be able to have people around you who are dedicated and care about the mission and can help that mission turn into a reality. And so I wanted to give a little shout out to my co-founder, Brandon Chafee, who is really the artistic and product visionary behind what Kahani looks like. I mean, the images, the environment, the game world that we've created, he really brought it to life. And I think that is a real piece of the ethos of how we've thought about Kahani, is being able to, as we say, make recovery feel a little bit more like play. And I think sometimes play can have a negative connotation around recovery, where there's this expectation that it always has to be fun. And that's just not the case. Play is not always fun, and recovery is certainly not fun, but it is challenging and it is rewarding. And giving the user an opportunity to have another resource, as you said, that allows them to explore these beautiful lands, but in the context of what matters to them when they need it the most, is something that we think was a little bit of a missing piece, and is a little bit of a missing piece in the way we think about recovery in this day and age. And with the advent of technology, which I'm sure we'll get into in this podcast, there is so much opportunity to, as you said, Ellen, meet people where they are and deliver the right solution at the right time for the right person.
Well, we're going to learn all about Kahani, but I always like to delve a little bit into our guest's backstory. So can you tell us a little bit about your college, your work, and the life experiences that led you down this path? And were you always interested in technology?
Yes, absolutely. So let's see. I went to, my undergrad was at UC Berkeley, go Bears. I studied molecular cell biology. This is always very interesting to me because, my grandpa studied neuroscience, and he was, a neurophysician in India, and one of the youngest in the world at the time. And it was something that really inspired me. When he passed, he had a brainstem stroke, and that was one that he was able to diagnose when it happened, but the technology in that day and age wasn't ready to cure him. So he diagnosed his own condition and knew that he just had to essentially wait it out. And at that point, he was only able to blink when my family had asked him if he wanted to stay on a ventilator or not. And ultimately, he decided not to. And it was a really powerful story to start, kickstarting my ideas around science and technology. And so in high school, I tried to, my dad helped me start the STEM club in high school, and I knew that I wanted to get into the biology space. And, then as a woman, you have your own health journey and your own curiosities and frustrations with what exists. And I certainly was curious to better understand my hormones as my body was changing and what was going on. But I never felt like the answers I was getting when something felt a little off were good enough. I always felt like I was told I was within range, but what range? Whose range? What range is that made of? And so I remember at, age 16 or 13 or something thinking, I want something within my own range. Am I normal for what is normal for me? Or am I normal for what is normal for millions of women who may not look and act and have the same lived experience as me? And so I think it started to spark, the wheels started turning for where I wanted to spend my time and effort. And so anyway, then in college, I studied molecular and cell biology. I was really, really passionate about looking into genetics. And at the time, I remember in my senior year, I met these two amazing individuals, and we thought we would start a company on STD diagnostics. So something about stigmatized spaces. I really love to jump in there and try to make it a little bit more normal to talk about. But at the time, we were working in a lab, a really phenomenal lab, trying to build up microfluidic technology, which is basically at-home tests. If you can do pregnancy tests at home, why can't we do STD tests at home? So we made some progress on that, but we were also quite young. There was a long way to go with clinical trials. So upon graduating, I then moved into pharma. I worked at Genentech, and I had a lovely, lovely team where I really was able to cut my teeth. And as a product manager leading some of our key AI and automation initiatives, it was really, really amazing to see how technology could be used to improve our clinical trial workflows, to try to bring better drugs to our patients faster when they need it. And that's something that really helped me see that there was a lot of opportunity. And so the work we were doing was amazing, and there was still so much more to be done. And I think coming to business school now at Stanford GSB, I've been thinking a lot about where we can use technology to make an impact in the healthcare space. And then enter Brandon, my co-founder, who is one of my best friends. And, we were both born and raised in San Francisco. And we kind of put our heads together in my first year. And we started thinking, hey, do you think we could build something in the healthcare space that could really help improve lives? I think we're both really drawn to making impact. The journey to eating disorders specifically was one that I, for one, hadn't really talked a lot about. I had watched two of my best friends go through a brutal recovery process, and one in which, we weren't really sure what the outcome might look like at times. And that was really between me and my therapist. I hadn't really talked about this with a lot of people. It was a journey that was so powerful to witness. And they're both in, lovely places of their recovery journeys now. But watching the pain and the ups and the downs, the days when it just felt like, one step forward, 15 steps backwards, and seeing that there were just no resources to fill the gaps at that point in time to help the people we love stay engaged in recovery was infuriating. It really, really, there were days where I felt very frustrated and angry at the lack of resources that existed. So, Brandon and I talked a lot about, both my specific experience as well as, those of people we both know and love. And we thought, there is a real opportunity to do what we love. And he's really the tech guru here. He's, a self-trained and an incredible designer. I mean, it's an innate talent that his engineering and design intersect. It really doesn't overlap in that Venn diagram quite often. And he's got both elements of that quite strongly. And so we thought about how can we use both of our individual skills to work through an area that needs it so badly, that is such a huge part of the healthcare ecosystem, but for some reason just doesn't get a lot of attention, a lot of money, a lot of care. And that's how we ended up here. And so for the past maybe 8 months or so, we started working in earnest on building out essentially a game world where recovery is broken into a very personalized evidence-based curriculum that is rewarding in the sense that every time you practice a skill, you're able to nurture, flowers that are growing in this garden that are all based on different skill sets that all, in order to grow them, you must practice these skills that are very deeply tailored to answers you've given previously in the app. And the idea is sometimes it's hard to nurture ourselves, but if we can start to practice the skill of nurturing, say, plants in a garden, maybe we can start to apply some of that behavioral habit to ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Wow. It's like, tell us more. It really, as you mentioned, AI and how important that is to this platform and the development and technology. I'd love to have you expand on that a little bit further. I'm shifting a little from the script here, but I also want to, the inspiration for Kahani, I'm okay, Kahani, Kahani. Why did you choose the name Kahani? What is the meaning? Because I'm feeling like it's very symbolic.
Oh, thank you for asking that. It's funny. Not everyone asks what the name means because it sounds kind of islandy, and the Brandon and I had a lot of iterations of names. We went through these whiteboarding sessions where we started to think about, what theme around maybe nurturing, nourishing, empowering, a sense of feeling of peace, of joy. What time of day does that inspire? What smells does that inspire? What weather type, maybe warm sunshine? How does that feel? How does it feel to feel empowered and to feel safe in your recovery journey? And so as we started thinking about that, and honestly talking to two of our closest friends on, what their recovery journeys were like and some of the words that they wanted to hold on to in times when it felt hard to hold on to recovery. And frankly, there were a lot of similarities in a lot of those answers, but at the end of the day, each person is so different. And what we realized was that sometimes we can feel disempowered in our recovery journeys. So Kahani is a Hindi word meaning story. And the meaning behind that for us is that we wanted to make everyone feel empowered to rewrite their own recovery stories.
Okay. Love that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So, this is so amazing. So the developmental process of this from start to now in the pilot program, how long did that take?
So we worked fast. I think over the summer, Brandon and I received, support from the Stanford ecosystem to go ahead and explore this idea. We actually started with 3 different ideas that ultimately we realized, we were not the right people to solve those problems. And that's how we ended up thinking, what are we the right people to solve? And so we got to the real idea of Kahani in, I want to say, end of July. We started thinking about this. We actually quite quickly were able to connect with Martha and Gwen Watson and Doreen Marshall at NIDA. And the 3 of them were huge cheerleaders and supporters for us. They really, really helped kickstart our vision, but also validate where we were going with this. So then we spent the next couple of months talking to, I want to say maybe 200 to 300 different folks across the ecosystem, from nonprofits to clinicians to folks with lived experience to supporters and caregivers to advisors. We really, really spanned the gamut to really make sure that what we were building was the right type of solution or option. Ultimately, our first version of the app, which Ellen saw, was very much this island aesthetic. And while beautiful and very different from anything that I think most people have seen in the space, and I think the mental health space as a whole, really, as we think about personalized curriculums and companions, we realized we were missing a kind of core part of the game element, being that you do these tasks, but this is not an addictive game. I mean, these are questions that require Socratic logicking and reasoning, and they can be exhausting to answer sometimes. And so there's not kind of an addictive loop of we're just going to, roll through all of the answers here. It's more so this is an introspective journey. It takes time. We do little bits day by day to start to reform our mental frameworks and start to get comfortable investigating our thought patterns. So we redid the game to include this element of reward because there wasn't really a reward after you've put in so much effort in that first version. So anyway, that took us the next, I think, 2 to 3-ish months to think through the iterations on that. And then this past month, we've been working hard on the newest version, which is very much, as we say, inside out themed slot for emotions and emotional honoring your various emotions, but in a very Farmville meets Duolingo environment where you've got this beautiful garden that you're growing and nurturing, but with this idea of micro progression with the daily skills that you get to practice. And so we've been working in earnest on this since, end of July. And we were able to pull this pilot together really quickly. I think it took us about 3-ish weeks to be able to recruit the amazing patient population who are our first users on the app. And in this first week of the pilot, we are starting to see some really exciting and hopeful engagement metrics.
So when you first proposed this, was it easy to get people on board? You were talking about all the people that, from NIDA and all those other people and then the other clinicians and patients and stuff. Was it easy to get those people to give you ideas and get them on board with this new app?
Oh, yeah. Surprisingly so. It was almost to the point where sometimes people would say, I don't know why this doesn't exist. And I think the way we were thinking about this was less so we're going to pitch this idea and try to get people on board. It was more so understanding where do we fit in the ecosystem. And once we realized that there was a key missing piece within what we like to say continuous engagement. So essentially, recovery doesn't happen at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday when you're talking to your therapist or dietitian alone, right? Recovery is every minute of every single day. But what are we doing in those minutes? What are we doing at 3 a.m. when you have no one else to turn to and you're stuck with self-limiting beliefs that are getting really loud and the urge to engage in behaviors that may not serve you? And that is the gap that we're filling. We are filling that in-between space in the 167 hours in the week in between your sessions with your clinicians and your medical team. So we're not presenting ourselves as a replacement to therapy or as a replacement to medical treatment. We're supposed to be an augmentative support that helps you stay committed to recovery when you already have the skills that you're learning from your professional team, but maybe have a hard time applying to your external stimuli. We spend so much time on social media. Diet culture is huge these days. There are a lot of really unhelpful communities that are very much projecting ideas that are very harmful for folks staying in recovery. And our idea is to create something that is so accessible to a wide range of a population that is so used to being on their phones, where now, even if you're going to spend 5 hours on TikTok, take 5 of those minutes and spend it on Kahani. And who knows, maybe that can be the circuit breaker. So that was really the idea of getting people on board, is that we need more of these circuit breakers. We need these opportunities to hit pause on whatever we're on autopilot on, because those frameworks have now become so ingrained, and take a second to investigate what's going on. And hopefully that becomes a habit where we start to unlearn some of these behaviors and replace them with potentially healthier framings. And so that was really the thought process. Is it was really easy to get people on board because I think people believe really deeply in this idea of creating more options, and creating more options, but also creating more of an ability to meet people at different points of their recovery journey. So for instance, transitioning out of treatment is another huge gap that we see Kahani being an integral part of the safety net. It's really hard to go from a recovery bubble to boom, all the stimuli in the external world that come with the triggers that they may come with that can throw you off the wagon so fast. And so if we can start to create opportunities to plug Kahani into the parts of the workflow where people tend to fall through, then maybe there's an opportunity to make someone's recovery one day shorter than it needs to be.
Oh my gosh, we're all just sitting here nodding. Yes, yes, yes. Because, we have 5 support groups a month, and I say we need 30 support groups a month because every day these people need support. So this is unbelievable. This is so great.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how the game works? And I think it's so important because if you've ever had an eating disorder, or if you've ever loved someone who's had an eating disorder, you know how hard it is for them to turn off that voice in their head, right? The voice that tells you you're not enough, or to engage in a behavior when you're stressed because it's a coping mechanism. Can you explain a little bit more how Kahani works for whatever somebody's struggling with, whether it's anxiety or it sounds to me like you're just creating a world with your progress, something that looks beautiful and is beautiful, but I'm just guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great question because even just in this first week of the pilot, we've seen folks use it in pretty varied ways, actually. So maybe one example, you brought up this idea, right, of you're not good enough or I'm not good enough, right? This is one that I think Brandon and I have battled with specifically around this idea of how can we start to chip away at self-limiting beliefs. So what happens when you go into the app is there is a short assessment that you start with. It's about 4 questions, and you grow your first little pot, your first little flower. So you're tapping on your pot, and you create your first flower by completing 4 different assessments, and so you're watching your flower grow. This is just to get an understanding of what brings you here today. What is your history with an eating disorder like? What are your coping mechanisms generally? And then what are some of your hobbies or hobbies that you would like to have? What is your vision or potential day forward? What would tomorrow look like with food freedom, for instance? And so we think through very questions that can be somewhat difficult to answer, but we try to break them down into what would a life worth living for you look like? And so once we can start to get an understanding holistically of where you've been, where you're at, and where you hope to be, which we know can be sometimes very challenging questions to answer, but even just glimmers of answers to that question can help us start to better understand where you're at to then create your personalized curriculum. So you finish your assessment. We now have a better understanding of you. Kahani has a better understanding of your needs and where support might be most beneficial. And then you enter this beautiful garden and you have a seed catalog. So essentially your options for seeds, and I'm going to read them to you because I find that they are so much fun to talk through because there's so many options that you can pick from. So essentially, you can think through a seed catalog around values and identity, emotional regulation and behavior change, relationship and communication, thought process, self-limiting beliefs, and kind of reframing challenging thoughts. And so in that sense, you have like 6 different options of what do you want to work on today? What has happened this week that has maybe thrown you off a little bit that you want a little bit more support with? So let's say we pick emotional regulation, and we have an option now to grow a hydrangea. And so that hydrangea is going to say this activity is around challenging self-limiting beliefs. So you now have a maybe 5-minute task of interacting with how you normally engage in self-limiting beliefs. What are your self-limiting beliefs and what happened when you're feeling those, when you're thinking those things about yourself? So now the app understands you in a very specific context. It kind of has the macro picture initially, and now it has a micro picture of, in terms of self-limiting beliefs, what are your patterns and behaviors? You answer that question and you get to pick where in your garden you want to grow that hydrangea. So you put it into a plot of land. And now in order to grow this seed, you have a customized set of about 5 activities that are generated for you. So maybe one of your self-limiting beliefs is, I'm not good enough. There will be an exercise in there likely that will help you challenge that self-limiting belief. So we'll take from the CBT framework, for instance, and do an activity I really love called putting your thoughts on trial. So you might, in the context of your self-limiting belief now, in this text-based exchange, start to have the Kahani ask you questions that may suggest a separate perspective of what would happen if you thought that you were good enough. How would that feel? How would it feel to say that out loud right now? And so what we find is that while these aren't groundbreaking new skills that no one's ever heard of before, we're applying it in a way that is so deeply relevant and personal to what you're thinking through right now that it allows for these mini aha moments that let you take a step back and think, okay, maybe there is a different way of thinking about this. Now, we know behavior change takes time, and we know recovery is not linear, so we don't expect doing one of these activities to be the end-all, be-all, and now, boom, you think that you are worthy and life is good. That would be an unrealistic, albeit ideal case scenario. But what we hope for is by practicing the act and the skill of taking a new perspective to thoughts that may not be serving you in a very validating and loving format that gives you the time and the energy that maybe you're not getting in other parts of your community or your environment, you're able to start to see the value of taking a kinder, more compassionate approach to your self-talk and to the behaviors that you may be thinking of engaging in. And so that's really the idea. And over time, your flower grows, your garden gets full of these flowers, and you have the chance to redo those skills too, because at the end of the day, you don't just do it one time and get it. And so the repetition is really important. So you can always go back and interact with skills all over again, which gives you an opportunity to keep applying it as your context changes. So maybe you graduate and now you're going to the real world and working your first job, and that brings with it a whole bunch of stressors and a whole new set of self-limiting beliefs. You can do that activity again in a totally different context. And that's really the point, is that this app kind of adapts with you. It's there with you through your life changes and through your behavior changes. And it helps track your progress, because it's really hard sometimes to remember the progress we've made when we feel really trapped in our own thoughts.
That sounds amazing. And this is April 2025, and this was just released, right? Mm-hmm. And right now it's free. And eventually it that might change.
Yeah, we are hoping to create such an integral part of your recovery journey that we can create an option that is far cheaper than some of the other options that may exist in terms of continuous support. Now, the hope is that in order to become the most accessible app that we can be, while also, being able to continue investing in the development of the new features and the new types of the growth in the app that we'd like to see in terms of holistic support and care, we're hoping that this pilot will help provide at least preliminary data around engagement metrics and qualitative and quantitative changes in various assessments that we're doing throughout the pilot, to be able to present that to insurance and hopefully be able to have reimbursement policy that can make this widely accessible for those who may not have any options in recovery.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm flooded with questions. I'm just wondering if we can expand a little bit on the pilot, kind of talk about who's engaged in the pilot. It is 8 weeks, and then transition us to following the pilot. What are the next steps? Who is this going to be for? How long will it be? I'm on, oh my God, this is amazing. And I think only possible because of AI. And you're really asking people to reflect and engage and use those tools that they are learning with their team, and which is truly unique, because it's those prompts that get people to dig deeper and think. So
yeah, so much there. I have so much joy just hearing the excitement in your voice, and the real hope we have that this could be helpful in someone's recovery journey somewhere along the way. So far for the pilot, we've recruited 34 beautiful, powerful individuals who are so diverse in background, experience, age range, diagnosis. So right now we are spanning 6 countries. We have kind of an age range in the teens, so around 16-ish, all the way over into the 70s. We have represented nearly every diagnosis of eating disorder. We have represented various genders. It's really, really powerful to see the type of demographic engagement we've gotten. It's so interesting. I feel like when we think of starting a company, we think of getting very, very focused on who your initial customer profile looks like. And I was thinking so much on demographics of, is there a specific type of person who I should start with to get a foothold in? And this pilot has been the most beautifully eye-opening experience that maybe that's not the right way to think about it, because it turns out a lot of times when we showed this app to various clinicians and therapists and dietitians, they were so excited about it. And their first thought was teens and young adults. They will get the most value out of this. And, what we're seeing is that, the average age in our pilot is around 30 or so. And we see that people like games at all ages. You could be 10 and you could be 85 and you could still love a game. And so in that range, what we've been thinking through is, how do we create an app that is truly accessible in that sense, and instead focus on the mindset of the individual that might be most eager to use this app. And so we find that someone in the middle of their recovery journey who has a bit of that self-motivation to want to recover at this point in time is likely the type of person who would want to think about alternate tools and solutions, maybe has been very disappointed with the tools that have existed to date, and is really looking for something else to fill that gap. Now, we know that motivation waxes and wanes. And so this is not to say that if you today are listening to this and thinking, I have no motivation around recovery, that doesn't mean that this app isn't for you and that you can't derive some sort of value from this app. Because motivation is all on spectrum. It's not an on-off switch. And so if there's even a glimmer of interest in wanting to try something like this out, that's really the idea post-pilot, is that we start to get such meaningful information around having this idea of your buddy in your pocket that's helping you, validating you through the journey, and gently encouraging you in areas that maybe may not be serving you anymore. That starts to become the norm. And then other people, we think we've already sort of started to hear a bit of word of mouth from folks who have heard what we're working on and wanted to try and get into the pilot. And so we actually expanded our pilot so that we could have more people join last minute, which was really, really nice. And your question around AI, around making this possible, is really the bedrock of how we've thought about building this. And this is where Brandon's skill set has been so integral, because we took kind of what we saw as the key themes in CBT, DBT, ACT, and MBCT. So 4 different evidence-based frameworks. We distilled it into what we thought would be various themes of overlap across those 4, and tried to pick over a database of, hundreds of and thousands of various activities that are normally done in session with therapists. How do we start to sort them into categories that maybe make more sense for practicing and reinforcing a skill? We personally, in talking through with our other teammate who's a student in the Stanford's PGSP PsyD program, she's been really helping us in thinking through the curriculum. We wanted to have this opportunity to the interplay between CBT and DBT and ACT, but create these micro bite-sized assessments, because we know people's attention spans, our attention spans, are decreasing by the minute. So we don't really want to have an activity that requires you to sit for 45 minutes and really feel it, get into your feelings. People don't have time to invest. People are scared to invest that kind of time sometimes. And sometimes you just frankly don't have the time to sit and deal with then the emotional hangover after the fact, right, of all of the emotions you've just processed. So if there's a way to start creating micro opportunities to practice these skills in a way that feels familiar, like opening Instagram or TikTok, but instead benefits you more. That's the hope of how we started to create the curriculum. Now, AI comes in a way that really helps us leverage the incredible models that exist already, but really prompt them carefully to start to understand you and your behaviors and adapt to what works better for you. So that's where the personalization piece comes in really, really well. Is you might have talked about, a behavior that isn't serving you in a previous part of the app. And when it generates your activities for this next seedling, you might see it come up and say, oh, wow, I mentioned that a few days ago when I last opened the app, and here it is, helping me work through something that I kind of just mentioned in passing, but it picks up on these little things and it starts to realize how we can apply new skill sets to these various parts of your life. And so in real time, you're getting feedback, you're getting validation, but you're also getting something that is working with you and meeting you where you are.
So I have a question. You say you have 34 people. Did you hope to have more, or how did it end up to be just 34? Were there other people that, just how did you get 34? Did you, instead of 100?
So initially we actually were going to do a 20-person pilot.
Okay.
And so we were recruiting for just around 20 or so, just because at this point we are doing a very hands-on approach in the pilot, trying to create all the right support systems, learning with our first folks on how they're using the app, and all the bug fixes and things that come up with, this was a little glitchy, or I couldn't get this on this button clicked. And so making sure that we have real-time 24/7 support on that. So initially we wanted 20 people just so that it'd be manageable. Then we thought, hey, we can expand it a little bit more because, I think at that point, maybe getting 30 folks might be a little bit better data. We might get a little bit more variety in the way people are using it. And we know, especially, I came from the world of clinical trials and pharma. We know that patient dropout rates are a thing, and that is something to plan and prepare for. And so we thought, okay, well, let's expand up to 30. We ended up getting a few last minute adds, and so that's why 34 ended up being the number. But the idea also was we did this in a very short time frame. So maybe around 3 or 4 weeks ago, Brandon and I were thinking, what do we need to do in the next 8 weeks to be able to help? We don't want to focus on hyper growth and hyper scale until we know that we built something that actually works and that people actually like. So tracking back from that goal, how do we know that we built something that people actually like and will continue to use and not just open one time and forget about? We knew the old version of the app wasn't cutting it. So the new version was what his focus was on for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And my focus was on recruiting patients. And so the recruitment process is a little challenging because this isn't an official clinical trial or anything. It is a pilot that is very much an opt-in. And so it was a lot of time on many social media platforms, ones that I didn't even know existed before this and had never had experience on. And frankly, it was a really, really interesting and inspiring process. But as a result, both of us kind of chugging along on our 2 work streams ended up being that if we could get 100, that would be amazing. But we knew that that would take a little bit more time. And at this point, with this critical mass, we thought it would probably be sufficient to kick off. And we were also so excited by the new version. We were thinking, actually, some of the folks we talked about in the in our pilot had reached out and were like, we want to use this now. Like, can you please let us use this version now? Mm-hmm. So we were getting a lot of demand from our pilot participants as well, saying like, we don't want to wait another 2. I already pushed it out 1 extra week because of some of the extra folks who had said they wanted to join. They're like, we don't want to wait anymore. We want access to this app. So we're like, okay, we're going to start. We're going to give people access to this app and deprecate the old version. And so that's how we got to where we are now.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of all the people that we've been in contact with that would want to jump on this.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing too.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh,
So
yes.
that was my hope actually too, is that we don't want to stop at one pilot. 34 people is amazing, but it is clearly not enough with the number of people who need the support. So we're actually planning.
We can load your next ship.
Yeah.
So
We
just
have people.
just let us know.
Because I know.
That would be phenomenal.
Especially trying to get insurances. Excuse me, my voice is a little bit froggy today, but especially getting insurances on board to show them results. And 34 people is wonderful, but you probably need more to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Thank you for saying that. We are hoping to start our second pilot in the next few weeks, and so now I know that it takes a lot more time to recruit patients than initially I had charted out for, and so we're starting that process right now. So it would be a real honor to be able to partner with both of you, your nonprofits, and think through how we can expand that number. Because Jack, you're completely right. I think 34 will be that's a really interesting indicator. This is good data. These are interesting stats. But is this scalable? And so that's something that we want to make sure we're covering all of those bases. And we would love Linda and Ellen for, as you mentioned, loading up our next shift would be absolutely phenomenal.
One question I was going to ask you too was that, is there a limit to how impacted by an eating disorder or a mental health illness someone is before they're accepted into the pilot program? And I hope that that's not the case, because those are the people who need hope. And every time there's something new to try, it keeps people engaged and on their path. And I think the hardest thing when somebody is struggling with a mental illness is the loneliness and feeling alone and feeling hopeless. So I'm very excited, and I have a whole lot of names flooding through my head right now. So just let me know.
Thank you.
Of wonderful people.
Oh, that means so much. And so to answer your question, so we are very clear in onboarding that we are not a replacement for medical treatment, and that we are not an escalation of care. So we do have patients acknowledge that this is not a crisis support line, and it is not an elevated level of care where we're able to provide potentially more support if needed. So with that understanding and that consent, again, this is a very much of an opt-in into the pilot. We do not turn people away because of where they're at in recovery. For instance, we have folks who are in various parts of their journey in the pilot. We have some folks who weren't in a higher level of care, but when the pilot started, and now are. We have folks who are moving in and out across the spectrum of treatment, and that's not something that we can plan for, but that's surely not something that we're going to take away from someone. And so what we've realized too is that while for some folks, like the weight restoration piece is so important and critical, we are very clear that that is not in our purview and domain at this point in time. And so even so, I think a lot of the way the treatment is thought of in this day and age is weight restoration first, then we can talk through the mental frameworks and processes. And I can see the reasoning behind that, but at the same time, I talk to so many patients who are like, I know that I need to get to the weight restoration piece, but that doesn't mean the thoughts in my head are stopping. And I do want help with those things. And I have nothing to rely on to help me with those thoughts right now. And that is a very, very sad fact of the world that shouldn't be. And so we're, very much open to if you are aware and understand the limitations of what this app is and what it isn't, you got it. Please use it. And if it can be a 1% increase in your headspace during the day, that's better than without having the app. And so hopefully it's a lot more than that. But we certainly already have experience with folks in very, very different parts of their recovery journey using the app right now.
Okay. I have one last question in terms of so after the pilot, next steps.
So after the pilot, we will ideally have another pilot with kind of our new, changes and features and things that we've added to make the app even better than it was before. And we'll start to, raise an angel round or and or a seed round. So I'm graduating this June, and my co-founder and I would want to do this full time. We care so deeply about it. So we'll be raising a small round to be able to continue building out this product, and starting to think through the monetization piece of it, and really create this kind of fully fledged holistic care, what we think of as the digital recovery companion that never existed before. And so thinking about integrating into clinician workflows, there's such a big vision we have for keeping all of the responses that patients do in the app private, but starting to create maybe some flags around like, oh, this topic area might be interesting to dive into in your next session. And so giving kind of a dashboard or a readout of how much time and the skills that patients are learning to the integrated treatment team, so that, we can start to really get all levels of support involved where needed, and make sure that that person has the resources that they need to stay on track and get through to the other side. So the real vision here is we want to expand this reach out. We want more and more people to be using Kahani. We're so inspired by kind of some of the work that Recovery Record has done in terms of paving the way for an app-based type of option, and would love to be able to have that type of recognition within the community that there is another resource that people know, that people love, that people are getting better using. So that's the real vision, and the pilot is our first step to getting there. But we'll be raising around soon, and so we'll stay tuned and let you know how things are going on that end. And if there are any folks who are interested in participating in the round, please do let us know.
Yay.
So I have a question. You said it was 6 countries. Can you tell me what countries are involved?
Yeah, we have the U.S., the U.K., Canada, Australia, Austria, and Bangladesh.
Oh. I could have guessed the first 4. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Surprising.
And breadth of ages and experiences. So it's a very rich pilot group.
So is there? This has been wonderful, and we could go on and on about this. So, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I know we're almost out of time here.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say thank you to you 3 for the honor and the privilege to be able to speak with you. It is such a joy being able to share this vision with you, and we would be so grateful to take you up on that offer to increase, our pilot numbers for the next round. If folks are interested in signing up on the wait list, go to www.getkahani.com. And I'm sure that'll be in the show notes as well. And then feel free to, if at any point in time, reach me as well through LinkedIn or email. I'm more than around and directly available. So if that feels more comfortable and accessible of an option, please don't hesitate to reach out. It has really been a joy and a pleasure speaking with you, and we can't wait to see what Kahani can do for folks in their recovery journey. So from both Brandon and I, we say thank you.
What Kahani can do. That's got a nice ring to it. Yes.
Yeah.
We'll be on your marketing team too. Thank you Thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful. So we're going to wrap it up now. This has been enlightening as well as wonderful. We extend our sincere gratitude to our listeners and to our special guest, Mehek Mohan. What an important conversation. We also need to thank RockVox Recording and Production and our marvelous sound engineer, Scott Fitzgerald, for his exceptional production of our podcast and so much more.
Thank you so much. This was so inspiring, and you really give us hope. It is just incredible. So we just look forward to more exciting things ahead as Kahani grows. So please rate, review, share, and subscribe to this podcast, Once Shattered, Picking Up the Pieces, on whichever platform you are listening on, and check out our YouTube channel. Learn more about Linda and Jack Mazur, the founders of the Emily Connection, and their beautiful book, Emily, the Story of a Girl and Her Family, Hijacked by Anorexia, available on Amazon.
And please learn more about our co-host, Ellen Bennett, and her wonderful nonprofit organization, KMB for Answers, and the great things that they are doing. The discussions we have with all of our guests are incredibly important, and they so emphasize the importance of mental health for everybody. Thank you. Thank you for our listeners.